Welcome back to Dr. Skull Games. I am here with a new series on Aphantasia and chess, and today I'm going to be looking at how does one calculate if you have aphantasia. I've been asked this a few times, and what this means is when I close my eyes, I don't see a chessboard where I can maneuver the pieces around. I see emptiness, I see darkness. So that is not available to me. So the question then is, well, how do you calculate if you can't calculate in the way that many people do? So today we're going to try to answer that question with some examples. So let's start with a very basic example. If I see a position like this, I start talking to myself about sort of like, what is the story of the position? What is happening? And the first thing I would note is that there aren't many pieces on this board. These pawns all look fairly irrelevant. What we're really looking at is these three pieces here. And an important part, I think, of any chess player's work is tactics training and getting patterns down. That's sort of the point of tactics training. And so a very basic pattern in chess is the skewer. I just sort of immediately am alerted when I look at a position. I don't need to calculate something. If two pieces are on the same diagonal, I'm immediately like, hey, can a bishop get to that diagonal? Especially if one of them is the king. And in this position, it's a very easy one, right? And so you can see, okay, yes, this bishop here can get to this diagonal, which will hit both of these pieces. Boom. This is a winning move. But there's one more pattern or piece of knowledge or story that I would immediately also go to, which is sometimes the king can move back to protect that piece that is being skewered. So we need to make sure. And we might be tempted to go, oh, whoa, the king can move back and hit this rook. But the way I would think about this position as well, let's think about when we put our bishop here. Yes, he can move back, but he can't move back onto this diagonal because it's going to be covered by the bishop. Therefore, the story of this position, I cannot see it unfolding in my head, but the story of this position is these two pieces are on the same diagonal. There is a bishop that can easily attack him. When the king moves away, he cannot move to the one square that would protect the rook. So this king has to move away. And after that happens, we are going to pick up the rook. Okay. You might be like, wow, Kevin, that's so helpful. The most basic tactic in the world, and you can solve it. Congratulations. But the point is to sort of get to how I think about a position. All right, so let's get to the second one. The second one is also not incredibly challenging, but this one was hard for me to get in my head. And to me, so the way I would start by looking at this is I would say, okay, so one thing I know or patterns that I have picked up in chess is that when you have a castled king and you have pieces hitting the pawns around the king, there may be mate threats, right? And so we can see here, this h7 pawn is being hit by two pieces. So immediately I'm thinking we need to look carefully at this position. I also just sort of know general knowledge, right, that this knight is out of position if he's going to be defending the king. A great spot for the knight is f6. There's a reason why knights are often on f6. We're covering this square. We're covering h7, so the h7 protector is not there. And I think before I started doing the checkmate patterns manual on Chessable, I kept getting tripped up by this one because I know, okay, so there's these two pieces hitting the pawn around the king. Oftentimes in these positions, by the way, there is a pawn on f7. And if there was here, I could just go here, bam, checkmate, game is over. But the problem with this position is I know that this king can slide away and then can dance away, and maybe this isn't going to work. And now if I try to check on this square, well, this pesky knight that was before not defending the position properly, now it is. So it all kind of falls apart. And I'm thinking, what? How could this be? I know this pattern. This pattern is easy. I just come down with a queen and check. Well, I've learned a new pattern from the Checkmate Patterns Manual. And I would say I missed this many, many times. But now I know when I see this particular setup, okay, what's actually happening is the queen is cutting off the escape square. And if the queen is cutting off the escape square, we can use this bishop to get the check. And then when the king moves over, well, now we have to see how are we going to do the mate, right? We have a bishop in the way here, but we can just slide the bishop back It is covering this escape square. Yes, it's being hit by the knight, but it doesn't matter because it's a discover check. When the king moves over, the queen comes in and delivers the mate. Now, I can't see any of this in my head. I can't move the pieces around. I just have sort of taken the story in. I understand how the story works. I know this pattern, and I just know that this is the way that this pattern works, right? So I know that when I see this particular setup, I can't go in with the queen because the king can escape. I can just see that in front of me, but I know the pattern, the basic pattern of check. The king only has one move. We cut off the escape square and create a mating square and have a discovery. King moves over, queen goes in, and we get our mate. So while this may be a very basic mate for somebody who can just easily move the pieces around in their head, for me, it was something where I had to really internalize the several patterns here, right? There's the pattern of the discovery, there's the pattern of this king, this bishop. I kind of call it like a loop-de-loo or something, where it's like bishop comes, well, not the queen, the bishop comes in, and then the bishop pops out and just holds the square for us. Okay, so that's the second one. That also was pretty easy. Now, recently, I want to show you some of the problems I sometimes run into, and I'm curious for you folks out there without aphantasia, maybe this is a hard puzzle for you as well. So this is a much more challenging situation. There's a lot going on. So when I look at a position like this, I'm trying to figure out like what is happening. So the first thing I notice is our queen is hanging. So this is a big deal, right? This is like issue number one. But I also notice we're actually down material. Our opponent has 3 pieces with their queen to R2. So if I just simply move here and preserve the queen, I'm probably going to lose. So with that in mind, there's not that many other great options. But another sort of feature or story of this position is that this queen, the queens are looking at each other. And there's also this discovered check. So there's a discovered attack and a check. So I know these patterns of discoveries when queens are looking at each other. I know that when the piece moves in between, interesting things are going to happen. I should look at them. So I calculated like this. I went, okay, we go here, and bam, we win the game, right? We win the queen. Oh, there's a problem. Hopefully you all see the problem. The problem is the knight can come back, take our bishop, and also attack our queen, or sorry, to back up the queen, and our queen is still under attack. So this move maybe fails. But by moving this knight, we should see that now the king is looking quite vulnerable. Another feature or knowledge or story about this position is that this pawn is very restrictive, right? It is holding the king out from a lot of escape squares. So now I start thinking to myself, okay, so I can go here, check, boom, discovery on the queen. The knight's going to take, backing up the queen. All right, that's a problem. But I've got this check. Ooh, okay. King can't move forward because of the pawn, has to move back. It looks like the king has to move here so that it's backing up the queen and the knight can stop the check. So I was like, but that's fine. Then I go here, check. The knight moves here. And hopefully you all see the next move. And in my head, I knew the story here, right? Like I knew the story that the queen is being protected by the king. So this queen cannot take the other queen because it's been protected by the king. But there's this very common pattern of when you have this setup where you have king here, queen, rook here, and a piece here, you can deflect the king by taking the piece. The king takes, and now the queen is no longer protected. Bam! We pick it up with the queen. But here's the kicker. I got all the way to here, and I couldn't make it happen. I knew this was the answer, but I just couldn't make it happen because I was like, wait, no, this knight took the bishop here and is protecting the queen. So something's wrong. This knight is protecting the queen. So what happened is somehow, because I can't move the pieces in my head, right? I can't move that knight and see it in my eye. I have to know that the knight has moved. And somehow I knew the knight moved here, and then all this other stuff happens, and I knew that I was taking a knight here, and the king was moving, but somehow I had gotten stuck in my brain that this knight was still on e6 backing up the queen. So this is what I mean. I go here, check. They take with the knight. I chase the king. I knew the story of this pawn holding and restricting that king. The king doesn't have a lot of choices. This felt like the best one to me because then they could at least defend there. But we can go back. I saw to here. I saw to here. I saw to here. And I saw queen takes queen. And then my brain went, whoa. What about that knight that's on e6 protecting the queen? Doesn't work. Doesn't work, buddy. Oh my goodness, I was so disappointed when I saw the answer to this because I was doing. By the way, I should say, as I was doing this puzzle through the chess gym, and the way it works is you write down your whole answer, you submit it, then you see the result. So I submitted it, and I was like, I got to here, and unfortunately, the queen is protected, and I just can't find another answer. And then everyone else was like, and then queen takes queen, the end. And I was like, what? Oh my goodness, the knight has obviously moved. That's what got the king deflected away. So I was very disappointed. But these are sort of the challenges I face sometimes with this inability to see the board in my head, to be able to move the pieces around. Sometimes pieces get locked into new spots. I'm curious to hear if others have the same problem, even when they can move the pieces around, even when they can see them around. But I thought this would be an interesting video for those of you who do have aphantasia to kind of see, like, how do I go about calculating what is my process like. I have been able to reach almost 1800 now despite having this inability to see the board in my head. And for those of you who don't have aphantasia, I'm curious to hear, how are you solving the puzzles? Are you telling stories and picking up features of the position like I am? Or are you just looking at the board and starting to manipulate it and move it in your head immediately? So it'll be very interesting to hear in the comments how you all go about doing this. So hopefully this was helpful, and I'll see you next time in this series on aphantasia and chess.